Walls of ice, the Blackwood estate sprawled across 5 acres of manicured gardens and old-growth trees. A Victorian mansion renovated with modern amenities while preserving its historic character. For Nora, the grand house felt as impenetrable. As its owner, 3 weeks into their marriage, she had established a routine. Mornings began with solitary breakfast. Dominic always left before 7, followed by meetings with Mrs. Porter, the housekeeper, about meal planning and household management. Afternoons were spent in the library or garden, evenings often alone, as Dominic worked late. Today, Nora wandered into his study while he was at the office. She ran her fingers along leather-bound books, elegant furnishings, and framed achievements. Life carefully curated to impress, yet revealing little about the man himself. Mrs. Blackwood. Nora turned to find James, Dominic's personal assistant, standing in the doorway. Tall and perpetually formal, he'd been coolly professional toward her since her arrival. "James, please call me Nora." He remained impassive. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to inform you about the charity gala this Friday. You'll need to attend." "Of course. First public appearance is Mrs. Blackwood." "Precisely. The company's largest donors." "Will be present?" He hesitated. "Suggests the blue Valentino." Nora suppressed a sigh. Even her wardrobe was a strategic decision. "Thank you, James." After he left, she noticed a small silver frame partially hidden behind a stack of books, the only personal photograph in the room. A teenage Dominic stood between 2 smiling adults, his parents presumably beside a sailboat. She studied his youthful face, unmarked by the cynicism he now wore like armor. Friday evening, Nora stood before her mirror in the suggested Valentino gown, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo. The doorbell chimed. Not Dominic coming to escort her, but the driver James had arranged. The gala sparkled with wealth and influence. Dominic found her immediately upon arrival, slipping his arm around her waist with practiced ease. His touch was impersonal, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Remember, these people fund our innovation lab," he murmured. "Charm them." Throughout the evening, she watched him transform, laughing, engaging, yet somehow hollow, like watching a masterful performance. She played her part, smiling beside him as they moved from group to group. "You must be thrilled about the Hawthorne merger," a silver-haired man remarked to Dominic. "Brilliant move." The board agreed unanimously. Dominic replied smoothly. The man's wife turned to Nora. "And you, dear? How are you finding married life?" "Dominic has been our city's most eligible bachelor for years." Before she could answer, a young woman in a revealing dress approached, touching Dominic's arm familiarly. "Dom, darling." "Ah! I've missed you at the club." "Veronica?" His greeting was cool, but not unfriendly. "This is my wife, Nora." Veronica's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "So the rumors are true, you've actually settled down." The conversation continued, loaded with innuendo about past encounters that Veronica seemed determined to highlight. Nora maintained her composure, though she noted how Dominic neither encouraged nor discouraged the woman's flirtation, as if testing Nora's reaction. Later, as they prepared to leave, Nora overheard 2 women whispering, "Poor thing. He'll never love her not after what happened with Vanessa. Classic rebound marriage. It won't last a year." In the car ride home, silence stretched between them until Nora spoke. "You were quite the performer tonight." Dominic loosened his tie. "We all play our parts. Even with Veronica." Corner of his mouth lifted. "Jealousy, Nora? How conventional. Not jealousy." Observation. She turned toward the window. "You wanted to see if I'd create a scene, perhaps? I won't." Something flickered in his expression. "Played your role perfectly tonight." The board was impressed. "I wasn't playing a role," she said quietly. The following Tuesday, Nora was arranging flowers in the solarium when Mrs. Porter approached. "Mr. Blackwood will be working late again, ma'am. Shall I prepare dinner for one?" Nora hesitated. "No, thank you. I'll handle dinner tonight." 3 hours later, Dominic returned to find the kitchen filled with aromas of garlic and herbs. Nora stood at the stove, stirring a simmering pot. "What's this?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "Coq au vin, my grandmother's recipe." She didn't look up. You haven't eaten a proper meal in days. I had meetings. You always have meetings. She placed a plate before him. Even titans of industry need to eat. Surprisingly, he sat. They ate mostly in silence, but when he finished, he said it was good, thank you. It wasn't much, just 3 sincere words, but in the frozen landscape between them, it felt like the first hint of spring. Cold arrangements, the champagne tasted bitter in Dominic. It's Blackwood's mouth as he watched his bride accept congratulations from the last of their wedding guests. Nora Ellis now. Nora Blackwood moved with graceful ease through the reception hall, her cream silk gown catching the light. She was undeniably beautiful. But Dominic had learned long ago that beauty often concealed the sharpest intentions. At 35, he'd built Blackwood Technologies into a billion-dollar empire through strategic thinking and emotional detachment. The latter skill had become essential after Vanessa, his college sweetheart turned fiancée, had been caught discussing how she'd spend his fortune once they married. The memory still burned. She seems lovely, his Aunt Josephine remarked, appearing beside him. Your mother would have approved. Dominic merely nodded. His parents' fatal accident 3 years ago had left him with little family besides Josephine, who had raised him after they died. Her persistent concern about his isolation had finally worn him down. She'd suggested the arrangement with the Ellis family, old friends with an impeccable reputation. He'd agreed, but only as a business transaction. A wife would silence questions about his personal life and satisfy investors who valued stability. Remember what we discussed, Josephine? Whispered. Give her a chance, Dominic. Not everyone has ulterior motives. He smiled tightly, of course, Aunt Jo. Later, as the elevator ascended to the penthouse suite of his downtown hotel, Dominic studied Nora from the corner of his eye. 28. Educated at Princeton. From a good family now facing financial difficulties, facts he'd gathered from the background check he'd insisted on. She hadn't changed from her wedding gown yet, though she'd removed the elaborate veil. Her dark hair was twisted into an elegant knot, revealing a slender neck adorned with a diamond necklace he'd sent as a wedding gift. Your aunt is wonderful, Nora said, breaking the silence. She tells great stories. She always has, he replied neutrally. The suite door opened to reveal rose petals scattered across the floor. Champagne chilling by the bed, the hotel's standard romantic package he hadn't bothered to cancel. He saw Nora's eyes widen slightly. Would you like a drink? He asked, moving to the champagne. Just water, please. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch instead, while Nora accepted water and settled onto the small sofa by the window.
Downtown.
Lights glittered beyond the glass, creating an illusory warmth in the cool atmosphere between them. I suppose we should discuss expectations, Dominic said, remaining standing. I've arranged separate rooms at the estate. Our public appearances will be coordinated by my assistant. Nora's gaze met his directly. I understood this was an arrangement, she said quietly. But I hope you know I take marriage seriously, Dominic. Something in her tone made him pause, meaning. She set down her glass. I agreed to this marriage for my family, yes. But I won't pretend it isn't real. She hesitated, then continued. I know neither of us entered this with conventional feelings, but I'd like us to have a chance to know each other before. Before what? He raised an eyebrow. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Before we become truly intimate, I'd like to wait. Dominic nearly laughed. It was an old tactic, playing innocent, withholding physical intimacy to create desire and dependency. He'd seen it before, of course, he said smoothly. Take all the time you need. Relief softened her features. Thank you. I think if we give ourselves time, we might find something genuine. He nodded, but inwardly dismissed her words as calculated. This marriage was a contract, nothing more. And if Nora Ellis thought she could manipulate him with false virtue, she would soon discover how thoroughly he'd insulated himself against such games. I have an early meeting tomorrow, he said. The second bedroom is prepared for you. As he turned away, he missed the flash of determination in Nora's eyes, the silent promise she made to herself that somehow, someday, she would reach the man beneath the frost. Cracks in the armor. The call came at 2:17 a.m., jolting Dominic from sleep. In the adjacent bedroom, Nora woke to urgent voices and footsteps in the hallway. She found him in the study, ashen-faced, gripping his phone. Dominic? What's happened? Ain't. Looked up, momentarily disoriented. Aunt Josephine. Heart attack. They've taken her to Memorial Hospital. Without hesitation, Nora turned. I'll get dressed. 5 minutes. In the car, Dominic drove with mechanical precision, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Nora didn't attempt conversation, simply sitting beside him, a steady presence as streetlights cast rhythmic shadows across his face. Memorial. Hospital's emergency department buzzed with subdued activity. A tired resident directed them to the cardiac unit, where they found Josephine, small and fragile beneath hospital blankets, connected to monitors and 4 lines. She's stabilized, the attending physician explained. The next 24 hours are critical. Are you her only family? Yes, Dominic answered, his usual commanding tone diminished. For the next 3 days, they barely left the hospital. Dominic worked remotely from Josephine's room, making necessary calls in hushed tones. Nora brought fresh clothes, arranged for meals, and handled the endless paperwork hospitals required. She sat with Josephine when Dominic needed to step away, reading aloud from Jane Austen novels she found in the hospital's small library. On the 3rd evening, as Josephine slept peacefully, her condition improving, Dominic found Nora in the small waiting area, staring out the window at the city lights. You should go home, get some rest, he said, offering coffee from the vending machine. She accepted the cup, so should you. I'm fine. You're exhausted. She studied his face, the shadows beneath his eyes, stubble darkening his jaw. She's going to recover, Dominic? The doctors are confident. He nodded, then said unexpectedly, She practically raised me after my parents divorced. My father was consumed with the company, my mother with her new life in Europe. He rarely volunteered personal information, and the sudden disclosure surprised them both. She loves you very much, Nora said softly. She told me stories about you when I sat with her this morning. Did she? A ghost of a smile. Nothing too embarrassing, I hope. Only that you built a rocket in the backyard when you were 12 and nearly set the gazebo on fire. His laugh was brief but genuine. In that moment, with defenses lowered by exhaustion and worry, something shifted between the small crack in the wall he'd built. When Josephine was discharged a week later, they brought her to the estate for recovery. Nora transformed the downstairs guest suite into a comfortable convalescent room, coordinated with home health nurses, and learned to prepare the heart-healthy meals Josephine's doctor recommended. One evening, Dominic found Nora and Josephine playing gin rummy, his aunt's laughter floating through the open doorway. He paused, watching them unobserved. Nora's attention to his aunt wasn't performative. There was no audience to impress, no advantage to gain. She genuinely cared. Later, as Nora organized Josephine's medications for the next day, Dominic brought her tea. You didn't have to do all this, he said, gesturing to the carefully arranged recovery room. She's family, Nora replied simply. Besides, the estate has plenty of space. He studied her, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time. You've been ... remarkable through all this. She glanced up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Anyone would do the same. No, he said quietly. They wouldn't. That night, Dominic found himself unable to sleep, replaying moments from the past weeks. Nora had shown unwavering support without seeking recognition or advantage. It contradicted everything he believed about people's motivations, especially those who entered his orbit of wealth and influence. The possibility that he might have misjudged her was both unsettling and strangely hopeful. The unexpected truth thought him painted the estate grounds in amber and crimson as Josephine's health steadily improved. With the crisis past, Dominic and Nora settled into a modified routine, still separate lives, but with moments of genuine interaction. Punctuating the formal coexistence they'd established, Dominic found himself arriving home earlier, sometimes joining Nora and Josephine for dinner. Occasionally, he and Nora would sit in the library afterward, she reading while he reviewed documents, the silence between them gradually becoming comfortable rather than tense. On a rain-soaked Tuesday afternoon, Dominic returned unexpectedly. When a power outage forced the Blackwood Technologies offices to close, the house was quiet, Josephine napping, Mrs. Porter gone for the day. He headed to his study but paused when he heard muffled sounds from the rarely used east wing. Following the noise, discovered a door slightly ajar to what had once been his mother's art studio. Inside, Nora stood before an easel, brush in hand completely absorbed in applying delicate strokes to a canvas. Around her, several finished paintings leaned against the wall's landscapes, architectural studies, and a striking portrait of Josephine that captured his aunt's spirit with remarkable sensitivity. He must have made some sound because Nora turned suddenly, surprise giving way to embarrassment. "Dominic, I didn't expect you home." "Power outage downtown." He gestured to the paintings. "These are yours?" She set down her brush. "Yes. I hope you don't mind, Mrs. Porter. Mentioned this room hadn't been used in years. I can move everything. If I didn't know you painted, it never came up." She wiped her hands on a cloth. "I studied fine arts before switching to business administration to please my father." He moved closer to examine the canvases. The work was undeniably talented, not amateur hobby paintings. Skilled composition showing years of training in natural ability. "These are exceptional, Nora." A flush colored her cheeks. "Thank you. It's just something I do for myself." A small desk in the corner. He noticed a folder labeled Children's Hospital Mural Project and opened it to find sketches and a half-written proposal. "What's this?" She hesitated. "A volunteer project. The Children's Hospital is renovating their oncology ward. They're looking for artists to create interactive murals to make the environment less clinical for the patients." She shrugged. "I was thinking of submitting designs. Why haven't you?" "I wasn't sure it would be ... appropriate." "As your wife?" The implication was clear she'd been careful not to do anything that might reflect on him or his company without approval. Dominic studied her, this woman who'd hidden neither in deception nor manipulation, but in careful consideration of boundaries he'd established. Who'd revealed herself not in grand gestures or declarations, but in quiet competence and genuine compassion. "My mother was an artist," he said finally. "This was her studio. She gave it up when she married my father. His family didn't consider it a suitable occupation for a Blackwood wife." Understanding dawned in Nora's eyes. "That's why you've never come in here," he nodded. She was unhappy for years before they divorced. "I always thought it was because of my father's work schedule, but later I realized she'd surrendered too much of herself to fit the role expected of her." Nora was silent for a moment. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" "No," he answered, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I think you've been authentic from the beginning. I just wasn't willing to see it." That evening, they shared dinner alone on the terrace, the conversation flowing more easily than ever before. When Nora mentioned her childhood in Pennsylvania, her volunteer work during college, her dreams of combining business acumen with artistic pursuits, Dominic listened without his usual skepticism. As night fell, he walked her to her bedroom door, their usual point of separation. "Good night, Dominic." Instead of his customary nod, he said, "I've been unfair to you, Nora. You deserved better than my suspicion." Her smile was gentle. "We all have reasons for the walls we build." He caught her hand as she turned to go, the first time he'd initiated contact outside of public appearances. "I'd like to hear about your mural project. Tomorrow, perhaps?" "I'd like that," she said softly. Bridges built the transformation wasn't immediate deep-rooted. Mistrust doesn't dissolve overnight, but as winter descended upon the city, warming fires were lit not just in the estate's hearths, but in the carefully guarded spaces between Dominic and Nora. Josephine, fully recovered and observant as ever, noted the changes with quiet satisfaction. Dominic consulted Nora about company decisions. Nora's artwork found its way throughout the house. It began appearing at events not as calculated business partners, but as a couple finding genuine enjoyment in each other's company. The Children's Hospital mural project had been accepted, and on weekends, Dominic often accompanied Nora there. Watching as colorful underwater scenes and enchanted forests emerged beneath her brush, sometimes he would roll up his sleeves and help, following her instructions with the same focus he applied to corporate acquisitions. "You're actually pretty good at this," she remarked one Saturday, as he carefully applied blue paint to a section of sky. "Don't sound so surprised," he replied. a smile playing at his lips. I do have hidden talents, so I'm discovering. The children in the oncology ward adored him, especially 6-year-old Theo, who insisted Dominic was secretly a superhero. Disguised as a businessman? Watching him read stories during their breaks, his usual reserve completely absent. Nora felt the final pieces of her heart aligning toward him, not the billionaire, but the man. One evening in December, snow falling softly outside, they sat before the library fireplace reviewing their schedules for the coming week. The Henderson dinner is Thursday, Nora noted. I have the final installation at the hospital Friday morning. Dominic nodded, then said, I've been thinking about taking some time off. Maybe that trip to Kyoto we discussed after the new year. She looked up, surprised. Dominic Blackwood didn't take time off? Really? What about the Singapore expansion? James can handle the preliminary meetings. He set aside his tablet. I've realized something recently, Nora. The company will always demand more time, more attention, more of me. But some things are worth prioritizing differently. Their eyes met across the space between them, a space that had grown smaller with each passing day. Some things, she echoed softly. Later that night, Dominic stood at his bedroom window, watching. Snowflakes swirl in the security lights. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Nora stood in the hallway, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. May I come in? I stepped aside, heart quickening as she entered the room. That had remained her boundary, respected but uncrossed all these months. I found something today, she said, holding out a small leather-bound book. When I was helping Josephine organize her things, he recognized it immediately, the journal he'd kept during the darkest period after Vanessa's betrayal. His pulse jumped. Nora, I didn't read it, she interrupted gently. It's not mine to read. She placed it in his hands. But Josephine thought you might want it back. Relief mingled with something deeper as he set the journal aside. Thank you. She turned to go, but he caught her hand. Wait, there's something I need to say. The firelight cast soft shadows across her face as she looked up at him expectantly. We married, he began. I convinced myself it was strictly business. Keeping my distance was protecting myself from inevitable disappointment. He drew a breath. I was wrong, Nora, about so many things, about you. She remained still, letting him find the words that had been forming in his heart for months. You asked for time that night, our wedding night. You wanted us to know each other first? I thought it was strategy, but it was wisdom. His fingers tightened around hers. I'm grateful because it forced me to see you, Riley, see you before. Anything else? Tears shimmered in her eyes. And what do you see? Someone remarkable, he said softly. Someone patient enough to wait for a man lost in his own fortress. Someone I don't want to spend another night apart from. She stepped closer, her free hand resting against his chest. Are you sure? Instead of answering, he lowered his head and kissed her, their first real kiss. Not performed for appearances, but born of genuine desire and newfound trust. When they parted, Nora whispered, I've been waiting for you, Dominic Blackwood. I know, he said, drawing her closer. Thank you for waiting. That night, as snow continued to fall outside, transforming the world into something pure and new. They began again, not as strangers bound by arrangement, but as partners who had found their way to each other through patience, truth, and the courage to dismantle walls built from old wounds. And in the morning, for the first time since their marriage began, they woke in the same bed, the winter light finding them together. At last.